All right. Welcome into the first ranking show here at the Hockey Writers. We're going to be talking prospects. First show. Um, it's really weird, this draft. First, I'll introduce who we have right on the draft team right now. Joining on the show, we got Dayton Reimer. Hey, Dayton. Peter Baracchini, Alex Hobson, Matt Sheridan, and myself, Matthew Zader. We're going to be talking prospects for this whole, I don't know, maybe probably going an hour and a half, maybe, depending on how long it goes here. But yeah, we'll talk NHL draft. It's a weird time. To say that right now is, scouts all over the place. Not really, a lot of them can't even get into games to actually watch them live. Watching a lot of video, and even some prospects aren't even playing yet. So we'll talk. We'll go through a top 10, 15, kind of talk about those rankings. But we'll be having a lot more of these shows as we go, talking about the prospects, getting a final consensus rankings. Let's start off with a first overall pick, which is kind of up in the air. Like last year, we had Lafreniere as pretty much consensus across the board as the first overall pick. This year, there's probably upwards of five. Wouldn't you agree, guys? Upwards of probably five players that could be first overall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I don't know. I see Owen Power top a lot of lists. I think people like his size. What is he, 6'6"? And he's been pretty dominant, but he's a defensive defenseman, right? Or am I wrong in saying that? Mm-hmm. Or is he like more of a two-way guy?
I'd say Owen Power's more of that two-way. I think he's more of a complete defenseman. He kind of Yeah, I would say so.
He reminds me a lot of Aaron Ekblad. Just like kind of the position that he was in going into his draft. He's got the size, and then he's also got the offense to go with his defensive game. He's got 12 points in 16 games in the NCAA this year.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting that you brought up the positional type for Owen Power, because it seems like the top three defensemen in this draft most likely could be Brant Clark, Carson Lambos, and Power as well. And all of them seem to have a specific skill set. Brant Clark is that, offensive driven minded puck moving type of player. Carson Lambos has that, two-way presence, a little bit of edge to his game, and you got the defensive minded Owen Power. So it's interesting to see all three with different types of skill sets coming into this draft right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of defensemen at the top of this draft. It's I've heard that this draft is not the strongest at the top. But I mean, you got arguably, I'm gonna say 2 to 3 defensemen that could become franchise defensemen, right? So I mean, you have Luke Hughes a little further down. He's been kind of all over the place. He's going to play for Michigan next year, which is, there's a powerhouse down in Michigan. You look at how many players are at the top, right?
That
are playing for Michigan. So
that's going to be really fun, especially for collegiate hockey fans out there. That's just even right now that roster is stacked. Imagine just next year, it's just going to be off the charts.
Owen Power is playing for Michigan right now too, so that just adds to how stacked they are.
Yeah. You got
Alex, I think your comparison to Aaron Ekblad, I was thinking that exact same thing. And part of me then wonders, should he be first? Ekblad, he was huge in junior. He super dominant. He came to Florida, and I think it's a valid debate, that he hasn't transformed that franchise. Mm-hmm. Right? They still haven't. Have they won a playoff series? I don't think so. They've been in the playoffs with him on their defense. I think you want to go on first anyways for somebody who's a bit more dynamic. Mm-hmm. So, in those top three guys, Lambos, Power, Clark, I'd lean towards Clark as a first overall, more of like a Deline, high offense, someone who could, lead the charge from the back end and give him a real dynamic team.
Yeah.
If I could jump in here, just my thoughts on Power. I like the comparison. Watching a bit of film on him, it's the thing that's come to question with him is his decision making. Sometimes he likes to go for that long stretch pass that usually results in a turnover. So kind of monitoring that, and if he can kind of fix that up and know when to jump into the rush and when to kind of stick back, I think those are the only few thorns on his side. I think he's a great all-around player as well, and I really do think it's between him and Clark, in my opinion, for the top spot.
I think in the end as well, it could also come down to who ends up getting that first overall pick, because different GMs will have different mindsets, and some might want to go for the big burly 6'5" defenseman first overall. Some might want the more dynamic one in Clark, and I think like I said, it could come down to whoever's got the first overall pick. But 5 defensemen in the top 6 or whatever it was, it's crazy. It's been a while since I've seen that many defensemen.
Yeah.
Even overall too, outside of the top 10, there's still some quality defensemen that could be had. I know that it's going to be forward heavy outside, but still, even when you get to maybe the 15th, 20th pick on, even extending into the second draft, there are some defensive prospects that are still, that may not garner the same attention as them, but they're still gaining a lot of traction in the scouting community right now.
Yeah. It's there's a lot of good defensemen in this draft. I mean, that's what I was saying in the 2020 draft. I'm saying, well, if you're looking for defensemen, I mean, there was quite a few in the 2021, but for this year's one, if you need defensemen, this is the one you get. Mm-hmm. I mean, you look at the forwards that are at the top, like Johnson and Beniers. Beniers is on, he's been kind of talked about in the top 2 as well, right? So it's going to be interesting, like you said, about who gets the first overall pick. I mean, if a team gets one that's has a lot of good defensemen already, they may lean towards getting Beniers or Johnson, or even we've seen even Jesper Wallstedt be talked about in the first overall pick, which is, a long time ago. We were just talking before we started recording here, Marc-Andre Fleury being the last one that was first overall pick. So Wallstedt, what he's been doing in Sweden right now, he's been talked about even in that top part.
He impressed at the World Juniors as well. I mean, it was I personally, heading into the World Juniors, I didn't think he was going to see much time between the pipes, just because we all saw how well Hugo Alnefelt did last year, and coming back when he's got another year of experience under his belt, it's kind of hard to gauge how much ice time Wallstedt was going to get, but he stepped in and he killed it. So
I think with Wallstedt, a lot of people are kind of judging that there's consideration for him being at the number 1 spot. I know a lot of people have kind of judged teams for selecting goalies in the first round over the past few years, because it's you can get your good goalie in the second and third round. But I think a lot of teams, I think there was one team, I forget who it was, but they were trying to trade up to draft Askarov in this past draft. And once Nashville got him, they backed off. So I think there's some teams that may regret not trading up and getting that pick or that goalie that they've always wanted. So, and I think that could be a similar case this year. You see Wallstedt may not be better than the top players at this draft, but because of the fact that he's in a kind of it's him in his own tier, and then it's kind of guys like Sebastian Cossa and Benjamin Gaudreau in kind of that second tier. But I think it'll be interesting to see, because some teams may draft him a bit higher than some people may have him slotted at, just so they can get that future star goalie in their net for a long time to come.
Yeah, Wallstedt, he looks really good, and he's been dominant for years already, right? He's is this, his second or third year in the SHL?
Yeah, and the numbers that he's putting up is absolutely, the numbers are just jumps off the charts right away. It's
amazing. Despite that, I still don't think teams are going to bite on him in top 5. I think that there's been a lot of history in taking goalies really high and it having them bite them back, right? The first round goalies, I would say most of them just don't quite develop like the team expects. Classic scenario, Rick DiPietro was supposed to be the Islanders' generational guy. First overall in 2000, and he's good, but then injuries and then development and pressure, and it falls apart, and it just ruins them for years, right? It's tough to recover after that. They traded Luongo because they had DiPietro. Luongo was a 4th overall, and there's one that actually did work out, but he had a rough couple of seasons to start his NHL career. And they bailed on him and traded him for what? Mark Parrish and Oleg Kvasha? Is that the deal? It was brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah, goalies in the first round are always a wild card. It really doesn't matter because you have obviously Carey Price. I forget where he was taken. I know he was a first round pick, but I can't remember what position it was.
Fifth, I believe.
Yeah, it was fifth, right? And then for every Carey Price, you've got a guy like Mark Byzantine, who I don't even play hockey anymore. So
I will say this about the goaltending. Oh, sorry, Matt.
No, goaltenders are interesting to draft in the first round. Yeah, it can be hit or miss, right? So, and development's huge too. Who you're getting.
I was just about to add on top of that. In terms of the positioning, I was just about to add on to that, you look at the 2012 draft, Andrei Vasilevsky, he's arguably one of the best goaltenders right now, and he was drafted in the top 20, 19th overall. And you could make the assumption that in that draft right now, he's probably the best player, and that was the Nail Yakupov draft.
Yeah.
And the last two drafts, we've seen Spencer Knight go. We've seen Yaroslav Askarov get taken at 11th, and he was supposed to be a top 10 pick, possibly. So I think we might be at a point now where we could see a third goalie possibly be drafted just outside the top 10, or if in the best case scenario, top 5, top 1. If Wallstedt continues the way that he's going, it's going to look like that.
Yeah, it seems like there's been a little bit of an influx in goalies getting taken in the first round over the past maybe 5 to 7 years. Because on top of those guys you mentioned, Peter, there's also Jake Ettinger for Dallas. I think he was a first round pick in 2017. And you've got Ilya Samsonov. And Samsonov, he's looking like the goalie of the future for Washington. So
good.
Proven that it can work.
Yeah. And then you got the goalies that get drafted way later. Levi was drafted in the 7th round. Yeah. He looked pretty good in the World Juniors. And he was playing injured, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, right.
So it's like,
did you guys see that
pick? It's like, you don't know. I mean, Askarov didn't have a very good World Juniors. Not very, gauging his, not lowering his stock after that at all. But there's goalies that can be taken all over the place that can become stars as well. So it's an interesting position to draft. I'll say that.
Definitely. Yeah.
But, you go into that top 5, there's so many, there's a lot of defensemen, but like we mentioned, Beniers and Johnson, which they're both impressing. Again, they're both playing for Michigan, which is ridiculous. Michigan's going to be dominating that top half of the draft. And have a bunch of picks, going forward. So it's going to be interesting. I really like Matty Beniers' game. I have him personally. I haven't released rankings, but it's a sneak preview. I have him as 2nd overall, and he's a dynamic two-way player that a lot of teams will probably be gravitating towards if they don't need defensemen. I think he could be a top pick as well.
I think you look at a player like Beniers, and I saw a clip on Twitter the other day where he had possession of the puck for a good 30 to 40 seconds. And it was just mind-boggling because you've got the defender like two-handing him in the back, and he's still maintaining possession of the pucks. And watching him at the World Juniors, of course, you can never base a prospect's development on that 2-week tournament, but it's an important gauge of seeing how he handles that competition. I think he looked extremely impressive. I'd argue that he was one of the best in the 2021 draft class in that tournament. Just the way he was able to get in the pucks deep. He's relentless on the forecheck. He has great possession numbers, and I think he's risen up on a lot of people's rankings. I think at the start of the year he was more in that closer to the 10 range, and now he's in the conversation for the top 5. I think it's interesting to see how people have kind of shifted toward, okay, he might not have a great offensive ceiling. Like he can still put up great offensive numbers, but he's not going to put up like 80 or 90 points in the NHL, I don't think. But it's that ability to do the little things right that I think a lot of teams will find attractive.
Right. Yeah. Well, look at Jonathan Taves. He was draft high pick, but he's never going to be a 100-point player, but he's probably one of the most important centers in the NHL. So they're valuable players to get.
Yeah.
Another forward I want to mention, not named Johnson or Beniers, is Dylan Gunther. I think he's another possibility for going in the top 5. He won Rookie of the Year in the WHL last year. He was just about, I think, 59 points in 58 games or something like that. And he's playing in the AJHL this year, which is that's where Cale Makar was playing in his draft year. He's got 5 points in 4 games so far. And who knows, being in the AJHL might screw him over a little bit because we won't see, I mean, assuming the WHL doesn't get started or doesn't have a season this year, it'll be kind of tough to gauge what his competition's like in the Alberta Junior League as opposed to the WHL. But either way, I think he's going to go top 10 for sure. He's a good player.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just looking at him just before we started recording. So that's it. Yeah, he's got some great hands, that's for sure. Pretty good wrist shot too. So yeah, there's a few forwards in that top 10, 15, even in that top 20 range, like Matthew Coronado, another guy that's kind of risen up from a lower ranking to be in that top. I've seen him in the top 20. I think, Peter, you had him in the top 20. He could be a player too. So
yeah, I mean he's just wow. I mean, he's just absolutely dominating with the Chicago Steel right now. And I have him just outside of my top 30, 36 overall. But I mean, with his skill set, his hands, his speed, he's just, man, if you could make a argument of someone who's like in a later round to jump into the top 30 or even raise their stock, I think Matthew Coronado could be that kind of player right now. I mean, yeah, I'm just in awe, shock and awe of what he does sometimes. Like, it's just unbelievable. Like, he's got great vision, great passing abilities. He knows where to put the puck so that his teammates can get it. And I think that's what's going to be really special for him going forward.
Yeah, I was watching clips of him earlier, and yeah, like you say, he's an amazing player, and it's like he was not talked about a lot before to be in that top. You know, I don't know if he was ranked in the first round by anyone going forward. He wasn't. I don't know if he was in the NHL Central Scouting rankings as being a first round, but he's sure pushing up. Probably one of the early risers so far.
Yeah, just having a look at Sam Constantino's rankings here, he didn't make the top 30 for that. So top 32, I guess. Kind of outdated here.
Yeah.
Been a while since it's been top 30.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Because now it's 32. I keep forgetting about it's now Seattle will be in this draft too, which kind of throws another thing into it. But yeah, this draft's the interesting one. I think there's going to be a lot of players that are going to get pushed into a first round, and guys that were ranked in the, upper first round that may drop because they haven't played. I think there's a bigger thing. Like I heard, well, with William Eklund, he's been injury prone so far here, and I've seen him drop a little bit, and he's a talented player. He couldn't be in the World Juniors, but he could be a guy that could drop out of the top 15, right?
Yeah. I believe he just had an emergency appendectomy to get his appendix removed, if I'm not mistaken. Seeing that on Twitter.
Yeah. So
I mean, that's tough to call injury prone then, right?
I guess that's not that. Okay. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just talking about forwards that like could see stock dropped. I mean, obviously the first one that comes to my mind is Aatu Räty, who was projected to be, kind of first overall, be that two-way big centerman. And now all of a sudden with a slow start, he's starting to make his way back into a top 10 conversation. So it's just like, how do you kind of judge that as well when you see him dominate at the junior level and then see him kind of like have his ups and downs at the senior level?
I'm glad you mentioned that, B, because I was just thinking that as well. I mean, Aatu Räty it's not too often you see a guy who was projected first overall to slip that far. I mean, in 2017, obviously Timothy Liljegren was, and I'm not comparing the two players because they're different positions, but in different circumstances too, because Liljegren, I think, dropped mainly because he had mono and he didn't play a lot during the year. But so like he wasn't projected first overall. It's not often you see a projected first overall pick slip down to 15 so quickly into the rankings. So I think that, like I was saying about Power, I think for Adu Radi, it's really going to come down to a team who it depends on the team that picks him and the team what they really see in him as a player, because he performed last year, and it's a little concerning that he didn't take much of a step forward this year, and that he wasn't named to the World Junior roster.
Yeah,
so that's a little strange, but
yeah, I saw that. That was a huge surprise to me that Ratty didn't even get into that in the World Juniors at all, which. You know, one thing that kind of stands out to me a lot with these prospects that get pushed, you know, moved into the senior leagues, they don't play a lot. I mean, their ice times are ridiculously low. Yeah. It's kind of hard to gauge what, you know, these small sample sizes that you see. And then they get shuttled between the senior and the junior leagues. And, you know, it's kind of hard to gauge where they actually are in their development. But, you know, like, you know, seeing that there's certain times they're not even playing at all. Like they're on the bench and they don't get any ice time. Saw that with Canucks prospect Victor Pearson. He's called up to the SHL and he sits on the bench for like 3-4 games. Doesn't play a single shift. So what's good for that, for their development in that case, just being around the senior players, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good point that you make there, Matt, because I find that a lot of the European pro leagues are like that. Another example of that is the KHL, and I'm going to go by my own team's bias here, but Rodion Emerov, he was drafted 15th overall. And if you're a Leaf fan, obviously you know that people were talking about him like he's the second coming of God. But
I mean,
fans were originally pissed off when the Leafs drafted him because he only had 2 assists in 21 KHL games last year. And then they're saying, oh, look, this guy doesn't know how to score. But in reality, how much ice time is he getting?
Yeah.
Coaches over there don't really seem to care about, you know, exposing their prospects for the NHL. They're just playing their guys in the best way they think is going to help them win.
Yeah. And I think you brought up a really good point, Alex, because I wrote when we were doing the live coverage of the draft, and I went out, I got Rodion Amirov with his selection for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And when I published that selection, got some comments saying, oh, you know, another forward, you know, 2 assists. Oh, what's this going to do, right? And I'm like, well, for one thing, he's more than just that. He's like a utility knife. He does everything. And you saw that with the World Juniors this year. But yeah, like you said about the European leagues, the fact that they get like, you know, the short end of the stick with the ice time, like 3rd or 4th line roles, it's really interesting to see that, like, yeah, they play in that role. They don't get a lot of minutes, but they evaluate more so probably the numbers from the juniors. So it's interesting to see how that always plays out, because you mentioned, again, Amirov, and even a few times I saw Vasily Podkolzin get the, like, you know, not play like, you know, less than 10 minutes as a 4th liner, not playing at all at times. So it's really interesting to see how they gauge that at times.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that they look for is, like, are they even playing at that level? Because to make that team as a teenager or before their draft year I think that's a pretty big sign that they are, you know, a top round talent. Like one of them I've written down, Oscar Olason. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Yep.
He's doing fine in the SHL. It's nothing crazy, but he's playing in the SHL. That's Sweden's top league, right? Yeah. So that is something that you have to take note. Even if it's just a little bit, he's considered one of the best players in Sweden then, if he's on one of the in that league.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
I think at that point it's just gauging if you can keep up. I don't think they really care about points. It's just, can you make the right plays? Can you keep up with, you know, the older guys? And in Olason's case, I mean, he's just doing a fantastic job right now.
Yeah. You look at some of these players and like, that's a good point. You know, they're called up, they're there, you know, they're able to play in that league, even though they're not playing a lot. I just find, you're playing those 4 or 5 minutes of ice time. I don't know how much you can really see. I guess you can see some of their shifts and see if they're keeping up and the good things that they're doing. But yeah, it's, you look at some of these guys and they get drafted so high, and then you look at the stats, like with Amarov, you said about his stats, and it's like, oh, he's not a good player because you look just solely at the numbers, and that's what a lot of people do.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, that's, you're looking at a lot of people that don't watch the games, they don't watch a lot of stuff on these guys. They rely on us to kind of, guys like us to, give them more information. But you just look at the numbers, it's like, well, why are they a first round pick? They got 1 goal. I mean, that's in some of these leagues. And if you look, a lot of sites don't show the lower leagues. They just show the professional league. Like, a lot of people use Hockey DB as their, stats website, and they just show that the SHL numbers, and then you're like, well, they're not doing that well. But unless you look deeper into their actual play, that's when you see their talent. And then they make it to the NHL, and you're like, oh, okay, there's the reason they were in the first round.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so Brant Clark, we were talking about earlier. He's playing in Slovakia in the top league there. I mean, it's not the top European league, but still against men, against, former NHL players. Last I checked, he didn't have any points in, 8 or 10 games or something like that.
He scored, sorry to interrupt, but he scored his first professional goal, I think, his last game.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
I have checked the before that then. But I've seen clips of him of just like controlling the play. One of them I saw was posted by Joel Henderson, works for or writes for Dobber Prospects. And like, that is an incredibly talented player, and now he's being considered top 3, maybe top 5, even though 0 points. Someone else like Carson Lambos too, right? He hasn't played a lot of games, super high points per game in the top Finnish league though.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Clark's got 31 penalty minutes too, so he's
Oh, wow.
he's almost matching his same penalty minutes he had all year in juniors last year. So that's what kind of stands out to me. I don't know what are the penalties that he's got, but that shows some stuff. He's able to play, which is the biggest thing, right, in that league, and he's actually showing quite well. For a men's league that it is a top league, so it's Slovakia, but it shows that he's actually able to play there. And I don't know if there is talk that the OHL season will go ahead. I don't know if he's loaned over there, so he probably will come back.
Probably, but then he'd probably have to quarantine, right?
Yeah. I think the interesting thing with Clark is, like you guys mentioned, he hasn't been really putting up the numbers, and with the penalty minutes, he has 31. He got ejected for a head hit, so I think that was 25 penalty minutes of the 31. So,
yikes!
But yeah, he was. I think a lot of people were worried just because of the layoff, because they hadn't played a game since March, and you see guys like Brett Harris and Brant Clark being loaned overseas, and I think it's a good sight to see, because the games that I've been watching, he's been gaining more confidence as time goes on, and you really want to see that are the top guys. Like when he first got there, he'd be like hesitant. He's never played against men before, wouldn't really step up into the play, was kind of like with the puck on his stick, he'd kind of just throw it into the middle and it'd usually get picked off. But now he's showing that confidence, like that great skating ability. He's jumping up into the rush, he's joining the play. And like we witnessed in his last game, a lot of people don't have access to it, but thanks to guys that are posting clips on Twitter, you saw that he had that confidence to go and drive the net, and he potted his first goal. So I think it's stuff like that is really, it's nice to see, because although this year we're going to talk about it in 10 years and say, oh, remember the 2021 draft class where it was a complete bonanza and no one knew where anyone was going to go. But you like to see stuff like that from your top prospects in the draft.
Yeah, one other prospect that really kind of surprised me, because I believe Central Scouting released their potential first round candidates late last night, and Brendan Othman did not make that list. And I was kind of really surprised, because we were talking about like the development of Brant Clark and how he slowly progressed with his play right now overseas. But in the first, I believe, 3 or 4 games, Brendan Othman, he kind of looked slow or kind of off getting adjusted to, the senior level. But since then, 15 points in 19 games with 7 goals.
Oh.
And overall, right now, he's showing his, offensive capabilities, his shot, his ability to, maintain possession. And that's something that really caught my eye. And I'm surprised that he wasn't even being considered in first round contention right now, where, kind of other players are in the same boat as him, trying to adjust overseas. Their original leagues are kind of in limbo right now. And, he's someone that should be getting some more, attention.
Yeah, this year is just so weird with, finding out where these guys are. There could be a guy that comes in and just all of a sudden he's getting drafted in the first round and no one else thought. It depends on where these guys are being viewed. I mean, some guys can get to games and watch these guys, right? In Europe, there are people that are able to go to the arenas, right? So there could be guys that just jump off the page to a certain, NHL scout and gets drafted in the first round, right? So I think this year you're going to see a lot of guys get jumped up from different rankings. We're going to have to be on the ball when we actually do the draft. Get as many profiles out as possible, because there would be some guys that are going to jump into the first round we don't even know. Right?
Kind of like a Igor Chinnikov.
Yeah,
that was one that really surprised everybody. Who's going to be the Chinnikov of this year, possibly?
There could be multiple, right?
Maybe.
There could be just more than one coming out.
I truly wonder how much not having a CHL season is going to affect CHL prospects draft rankings, because it's easy to take a look at elite prospects and say, okay, this guy playing in the WHL last year was incredible. And, he's still worth a mid first round pick, but if you're not playing all year, how do you know if they even took a step forward? Right.
Yeah.
Because there are some guys like Brant Clark who are compensating and they're playing in Europe to stay fresh leading up to their draft year. But there are some CHL players who aren't doing anything. They're just sitting at home. So,
yeah.
Well, I mean, not sitting at home, actually. They're probably working out. They're probably practicing, but not getting any actual in-game action. So,
yeah.
That's huge. Sorry, Matt, I think it was a really interesting point that Peter brought up about Igor Chinnikov. And I think this draft, of course, with the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade finally happening this morning, but I think it's interesting to see, because I think a lot more teams will be open to trading first round picks. I think that was a situation where if I had to guess the trade before it happened, I would have thought that a first round pick this year would have been included in it. But of course, that wasn't the case. But it's gonna come down to the fact that certain teams are gonna have to adapt to the pandemic and video scouting. It's a lot tougher than in-person scouting. But I think it'll be interesting to see, because a lot of people were, like Peter just mentioned, Igor Chinnikov, no one expected him to go in the first round, and now he's kind of quietly developing into a pretty solid prospect. So I think it'll be interesting to see. I think the teams that will really win this draft in a few years down the road are the teams that are able to see that talent that some people might not be able to see and willing to take the risk. So I think you'll see a lot of guys that go in the first round that might not have potentially been on people's list. I thought that was a pretty good point to bring up.
Yeah, it's there's guys that like I mentioned on Twitter earlier that this is not the year to tank. You're not getting a surefire number one Alexis Lafreniere type player at the top of this draft. I mean, not saying that Owen Power and Matt Beniers and all those guys aren't going to be elite talents, but they're, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's no generational talent in this draft.
No. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
No, the fact that we're sitting here debating who's going to go first overall tells that story. Yeah. Unless, there were 5 generational talents. I don't think that's the case this year. So.
No. This is not a Matthews versus Line debate.
I will say this, though. The 2022 and 2023 drafts are looking, pretty good right now. Nuts. So I know that 2021 may be a low year, maybe that in between where, you're going to probably have first round talent, but nothing as like a superstar defining, franchise altering kind of player. Like I said, next year and the year after, that's when the fun is probably going to begin. But this year's, it's
I am so excited for next year's draft.
Honestly, I know
I know that's not what we're talking about today, but
No. I'm seeing like Matvei Michkov, clips of him just like still putting the puck in the net, scoring at an unbelievable clip right now. And it's like, he's still 2 years away. And it's like, man, imagine like what he's going to be like 2 years from now.
Yeah. Well, look at the guys that dominated the World Juniors. They weren't 2021 guys. They were 2022 guys. So it's like, you can see that already. What are they going to be next year?
Super crazy.
You could kind of compare the 2021 draft to the 2014 draft almost, because it was kind of like the slight down year between two pretty stacked drafts. Because if I recall correctly, 2013 and 2015 were both pretty stacked at the time.
Yeah,
I think so, yeah.
I think another draft you could compare the 2021 draft is 2017, where you saw Nico Hischier have a dominant performance for the Swiss, but it was always that debate between Hischier and Nolan Patrick up until the draft. But I think it's a perfect comparison as well, because you see guys like Cale Makar that go fourth overall, but now look at him. He's in the league and he's making a huge impact. So I think, and Miro Heiskanen, third overall, he's a great young defenseman for the Dallas Stars. So I think it'll be interesting to see. Of course, the 2022 and 2023 drafts are going to be stacked. Probably some of the best drafts of this next decade, but I think 2021, you can still see a lot of great players come up with it.
It's also
I find it interesting that you mentioned 2014, because that was Ekblad's draft.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
No, I think it's just really interesting because Matt brought up a good point with Heiskanen and Makar. Like, obviously, they were highly touted. I mean, not a strong draft year, but now look at them. They're like Calder, or not necessarily Calder, but like they're playing as like top tier defensemen right now. So I think it's how teams are going to develop those prospects as well in the future. Not necessarily to say that like if they pick up let's say Carson Lambos, maybe his ceiling may not be as high as many thought, but if he develops properly, he could turn into something else maybe. So it's going to be interesting to see how those players develop in the long run.
Sportsnet did their roundtable with all their predictions for the awards and stuff, and some of them had Makar and Heiskanen winning the Norris. So when you've got defensemen like that coming out of the draft and in the top three, I mean, it says a lot about how skilled some of the guys can be. Some of the defensemen you take top five are, and we could see the same thing this year. Who knows?
I'll mention this for our Canucks guys too. You guys remember in 2017 who went fifth?
There you go.
Pettersson, yeah.
And then Hughes later on again. Hughes dropped in his draft too, and a pretty good guy in the before the top 10.
Well, he's undersized though, right? He's what is he, under 6 feet?
Yeah, he's right? Is it 5'10", something like that?
Yeah. Like NHL scouts still love the big size, and so I think Owen Power might get first overall just for that fact. I don't agree with it. I think you go for someone else who's a little bit more dynamic, like a Lambos or a Clark, or even like a Luke Hughes, Matt Bernier's, or Beniers.
That's true. Like Owen Power has a lot of that. Yeah, a lot of teams still love that size because, I mean, the league still needs that size on the back end. But it's hard to argue with guys like Makar and Hughes who are dominating the league at their size. I mean, Makar's not the biggest guy either. So it's I don't know. It depends. Like Power can sure skate, and that's the biggest thing. He's 6'5", but he's got great speed for a guy of his size. So, but yeah, there's going to be a lot of debate on the first overall pick, and that's the biggest thing. We've kind of dominated the discussion right now is the first overall pick of who's going to get it. But I think there could be. I think it's really will come down to the team that gets that first overall pick, because there are some teams that are stacked on defense and they won't need a guy like that. But there are a lot of teams that are thin on the prospects for defense and even goaltending. So it'll be interesting to see, because there's no clear cut number one. I think it'll depend on team need when it gets to that point.
Yeah.
I think another interesting thing was, sorry to interrupt, Aiden, but I think another interesting thing was the ranking of Simon Edvinsson. He's a bit of a polarizing prospect. When I was watching Bob McKenzie's first rankings, he had him at 2. And I know Bob McKenzie has a ton of contacts in the scouting world, so it was interesting to see how maybe some scouts view him higher than at least what I think he will go. I think he's closer to 10 in my opinion. I know some people may not agree with that, but I think it's interesting to see, like, even in this year, there's guys like that who are some people have him so high and some people have him so low. And I think that's going to be the storyline of this draft, is seeing players kind of rise up or fall down, like Hatu Raki, another player. And it'll be interesting to see as we lead up to the draft, some players not playing and some players that do get the chance to play some big minutes.
Yeah.
No, and I know that we've like spent quite a bit of time on, Clark, Power, and Lambos, but you bringing up Simon Evanson is really another interesting defensive prospect that I think could garner a lot of attention. I mean, he's still got the size, 6'4", 185 pounds, just a shade under Owen Power, who I believe is 6'5". And, this is another guy who's got, relatively good mobility. He can engage physically, lay a hit. And he's just someone that like really caught my eye, or it was always at the top of my list. But I think with just, other names creeping in, he kind of pushed down for me. But I think he could still be maybe not necessarily top 2, but I think maybe in that 5 to 10 range, he could go anywhere between there.
Yeah. I think the knock on him was just I'm not going to say like his decision making, but I think sometimes he would like jump up and get caught. And then, I don't know, it was just sometimes his decision making on the ice wasn't the best. I think that was the only knock on him. But yeah, someone mentioned, I forget, but the size and people loving scouts, still loving that size. I think it'll be an interesting option to see, because he's definitely got that frame that he can build, that he can grow into over the next few years.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and then you look at some of the lower ranked defensemen too. There's some good guys in the top, into the 20-30 range as well. Like I was looking at Gabrielson, Hugo Gabrielson, who's a guy that's kind of jumped out to me as being creepy into that first round discussion as well. I think Josh mentioned him earlier. He tweeted out about him being pushing into the first round. So there's going to be a lot of defensemen, I think, even in that, later first round, that could potentially be impact defensemen as well. So there's a lot to choose from, I think, from a defense standpoint in this draft. So it's going to be interesting to see where these guys going to fall at the end of all this.
One guy I want to take a second to talk about, just because he's a hometown boy for me, at least for this junior team, not necessarily for where he was born, but Francesco Pinelli. I think he's ranked mid-first round. He played for the Kitchener Rangers last year. He put up 41 points in 59 games during his rookie season. And just taking a look at his page here, it's like he hasn't played any OHL games, obviously, and it says that he's on loan in Slovakia with HDD Jesenis. I'm not going to try and pronounce that. But he hasn't played a game yet this year, so I wonder where he's going to end up, because I've seen scouts rank him as high as potentially like 10th to 15th and as low as second round. So he's one of those guys who could go anywhere.
Yeah, I saw recently that Pinelli recently just went on loan. I think it was about like a day or two ago.
Okay,
when,
that would probably explain why
that he was on loan.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, yesterday.
That would probably explain why he hasn't played any games in Slovakia yet. But either way.
Yeah, it's interesting to see all these guys go on loan in Europe, especially with the junior league still up in the air and talking about them returning, and with the quarantine in effect as well. With the if they do return, there has to be that 2-week quarantine before they're able to play again. And I don't know, there's certain players that may just stay over there. I don't know if they have the choice in the matter. If the OHL starts, they have to come back. But it's an very interesting year when it comes to evaluating these guys and where they go. Mm-hmm. I get why a lot of these players want to play. I mean, they have to. I couldn't, if I was playing, I couldn't practice and just sit around for months and may not even play at all. It's hard. I think it's probably really hard in these players to actually go through this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's kind of funny because when you look back to the 2016 draft, if you remember Austin Matthews, he committed to Zug in Switzerland for his year. And people thought that was the most foreign concept ever, seeing a guy who spent his pre-draft year playing for the U.S. development program. And then, instead of going the NCAA route or going to the juniors in Canada, he decides to go to Switzerland of all places. But it worked for him. And now look, you've got 10s, 20s of prospects who are doing the exact same thing, and they don't really have a choice.
Yeah. It's a weird year for a lot of people. And, the scouting world is all over the place. And a lot of scouts that didn't normally use the video scouting route have to use it. They're so used to going to the rink and watching games, and now they have to rely on video. And I'm sure Instat's got an influx of subscriptions, this year. So it's an interesting. There's a lot of those old school scouts that I've heard all over the place that they're not used to doing this video scouting. And then there's guys like us who that's all we kind of do. So
yeah, exactly.
Right. So it's
adjusting to the environment, I guess, right now.
Yeah. Like I've got the Vancouver Giants just down the road, and I was going to do that this year, go to Giants games and do some scouting, but that didn't happen. So it's interesting to kind of get the video, because to me it's hard to track a player when you're at the mercy of just the camera, because you can't watch them away from the puck, right? So it's whoever has the puck, and that's all you really see.
Yeah.
I think
you might be able to tell. Oh, wrong side. I'm in Saskatoon. And last year it was great seeing a couple of games and being able to scout a few players. Edmonton Oil Kings came to town, got to watch Jake Neighbors, and just see how dominant he was, like just a bull in a china shop. Would just get in the corners and fight for it all the time, every time he's on the ice. And then was he an early second round pick? I'm blanking on that at the moment.
I think he went in the first.
He's the first. That's right. Okay. Yeah. So getting to see that was really interesting. And now, I can't be able to go to those games and see those players up close, which is going to make things interesting. However, I do want to mention before we go too much further is Cole Sillinger. We haven't talked about him yet. And I think he could sneak into the top. Well, he is top 15 right now. I think he could sneak into the top 10. He's playing in the USHL. He's got 3 points in 4 games, 2 of them goals. So that's pretty decent. Last year, he had 58 points in 48 games with the Medicine Hat Tigers, plus 5 goals in the Under-17 World Hockey Championship. There's some real talent on this kid. So I'd love to see him become a high pick, especially with all these defensemen who are highly rated. Someone might go for the skilled center.
While we're on the topic of defensemen that could potentially squeak into the top 15 or the top 10, I also want to take a second to talk about Corson Ceulemans. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. Sam Constantino has him ranked at 10th overall right now. And the one thing that intrigues me about him is he is a right-handed defenseman playing for the Brooks Bandits of the Alberta Junior League, which, as you recall, is a splitting image of Cale Makar in 2017. And I know this is a super small sample size to pick from, but he's got 2 goals and 5 points in 2 games so far. And he's got decent size. He's 6'2", and I think if he has a big season in the Alberta Junior League, he could be one of those guys that just teams take a flyer on. He could possibly squeak into the top 5 if he does well.
That's bold.
bit of a hot take, but if he
for sure.
Gotta have at least one of those.
Nothing wrong with the hot takes, Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, it's. I really I think. Like I mentioned Coronado earlier, I think for me, I think he could push into that discussion towards the top 10. I don't know if that's as much of a hot take the way he's playing right now, but there's a lot of guys that, watching him, I haven't seen a ton of prospects of, in the realm of, top 100 type thing. I mean, I'm more versed in the top 30, but I really like Coronado a lot, not just because he has the same name as me.
I mean, it helps though, right?
It helps. It jumps out on me. So I mean, talking about that top five, do we have a consensus top five right now? But I don't think we really do.
Really, we could make
there's
up
a lot of guys.
Because like we were talking about when we first started talking about potential first overall picks and top five, it's really going to come down to the GM that's picking first overall. Because I know for a fact there's some guys in the league who will see Owen Power's size, 6'5" or whatever, and 230 pounds, and then see his offensive game and think that's a match made in heaven. But then you've got other GMs, maybe like I'll use Kyle Dubas as an example, even though I hope he won't be picking in the top five this year. But if you see him in the top five, or like if you had a top five pick, someone like him might go after Brandt Clark because he's that dynamic. Dubas tends to lean more towards the dynamic players over the skilled or the size burly players. So it's hard to gauge who's going to go in that top five and in what order, just for that reason.
Yeah. So who do you see as getting that first pick or high chance to it? Because I see on this on some predictions like Senators are supposed to finish low again, Ducks and Sharks, Blackhawks, Red Wings, Devils. Like, what do you think?
I think it would be hard to put an actual, like, just give an actual team because, you know, there's the lottery, and we're very quickly, or we're very short or soon, I guess, into the season. So we don't know who's going to actually finish that low. But if we're going to pick a team, I could see the Sharks maybe finishing last and getting that first overall pick.
I could see that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And with the Sharks, their defense depth for young defensemen, it's not that deep. So I would say they probably would go for a defenseman. And
you know they're looking for some redemption because they had a lot of lost top picks over the past 3 years or so. So yeah, yep. So it was great. It's great talking about prospects right now, even though a lot of them haven't played, and but still, I mean, there's a ton that are playing, and it's been great talking prospects with you guys. We'll be doing this throughout the year. This isn't our only show. We'll try to nail down at least a top 32 and have that on the Hockey Writers as well. A top 32 consensus, top 32. We'll try to get that done towards the, probably in the next month or so as some of the junior leagues actually get going. So it was great talking process with you guys. Again, it was Peter Baracchini, Matt Sheridan, Alex Hobson, Dayton Reimer. Thanks, guys, for dropping in, talking prospects. We'll be talking throughout this NHL season into the off season. Of course, we've got the draft profiles coming out around March time too. So there's going to be a lot of discussion on the draft. So thanks, guys, for dropping in.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So make sure to get on YouTube, subscribe, like the page. We are also on Facebook. Like the page there too. And Hockey Writers Live is, of course, every week as well. So thanks for watching, and we'll be back for more debate and more talk on the draft.